I've shot with the X100V since its release, and over this period, I would say the 35mm focal length has become a very comfortable field of view. Now you may argue this, but I believe 35mm does live up to its moniker of being the most versatile focal length. I kept convincing myself this was the only focal length I needed for photography, and I think I lasted pretty long. But there was always something in my peripheral I just couldn't ignore. This is the Fujifilm WCL-100. There's two models, this one and the WCL-100 Mark II. Only difference being the magnetic coupling on the lens, but I'll get to that later. WCL stands for Wide Conversion Lens, and as the name suggests, it was made to convert the X100 camera's 35mm focal length to a 28mm focal length. It's a very compact lens constructed entirely of metal and glass, which makes it feel very solid and dense despite its diminutive form. The thread diameter of the WCL is the same as the X100, meaning you can use your existing 49mm filters with the WCL, and for what it's worth, like the X100 up to the V model, it is made in Japan. The X100 has a reverse thread mount on its built-in lens, and usually you would take off the thread protection ring, screw on a thread adapter, and then attach your lens filters. The WCL was designed to screw onto the X100's reverse thread mount without the need for any adapters. As I mentioned earlier, this is the Mark I model. There's a Mark II version of the WCL that comes with magnetic pins at the rear element of the lens, similar to that you will find on the back of Fuji lenses made for the interchangeable models of the cameras. Having the magnets at the back simply means it can communicate to the X100 that a conversion lens has been attached, and the camera will automatically change its in-body distortion correction to suit the wider focal length. As the Mark I version of the WCL doesn't have magnets, the only difference is a little bit of extra work for you to manually dive into the menu and find the setting to tell the camera to change to the wide conversion lens. You'll know it's activated when you see the symbol on the back of your LCD display. I've heard there are ways to hack magnets onto the Model 1 to turn it into the Model 2, but I'm not bothered to do it. But if you want to, do so at your own discretion. It really has transformed my X100V into a completely different camera. 7mm on paper doesn't seem that impressive, but anyone who has owned a super wide angle zoom lens can attest that every millimeter wider you go makes a dramatic change to the field of view. This comes in very handy in tighter situations where you physically don't have space to zoom with your feet, but want that one extra subject matter in the frame. For images that require more context, or for layering with less bokeh at higher aperture values, the 28mm focal length does that much better than 35, all whilst keeping distortion to a minimum. Honestly, I feel, and mind you, I've shot with a 24mm focal length too, 28mm really is the ideal focal length for dramatic but not distorted photos. You'll still get proper straight lines close to the edges, and the X100 in-camera distortion correction helps a lot. A small advantage for wider focal lengths is the ability to lower your shutter speed without getting a blurry image when shooting handheld. You know that rule where you double the focal length to figure out the recommended minimum shutter speed? If we apply that rule, you could shoot at 1/60th with the 28mm, while at 35 it would be something more like 1/80th. But in a practical setting, depending on how steady your hands are, I'd say you can save one stop by shooting 28mm. Now this may not interest anyone, but let's talk about getting up close and personal with this lens. To be blunt, if you feel even a smidge uncomfortable taking an upper body shot of a stranger at 35mm, you're going to have a bad time with 28mm. What used to be achievable around 1 meter away on the 35mm now becomes more like 60 centimeters on the 28. And if you want a face to fill the frame, you're looking at 30 centimeters or so. When I started using the WCL, for the first few weeks, I struggled with getting close, especially in larger spaces and less people. It was pretty scary indeed. So what I ended up doing as a compromise was do what many others tend to do, shoot the subject off center so that it doesn't look like you are shooting at them, but past them. I will admit that the near silent leaf shutter on the X100V helps immensely with being discreet and unobtrusive. Now, while the WCL is a welcome addition to my kit after having used it for a month or so now, if there is anything I can complain about, and really this isn't a huge deal, I'm just trying to find excuses to talk negative about it to balance out the praise. When you're shooting JPEG, the in-camera distortion correction does a terrific job, but I generally tend to shoot RAW, and I like to touch up my photos in Capture One. The problem is, while Capture One has a good library of lens profiles from various manufacturers that can detect the metadata of the raw file and apply the correct distortion correction, there doesn't seem to be one for the WCL-100 conversion lens. At least I couldn't find it. Maybe they don't consider the conversion lenses as an actual lens? Either way, when I import the photos taken with the WCL, you can really see the true distortion the WCL adds to the 23mm lens of the X100V. It's nothing crazy deal-breaking, but it's just the extra step of manually correcting the distortion by eye. What I did was create a preset and labeled it WCL-100 Distort Correct, so I can apply it to any photos I take with the WCL and then stack my other presets on top. So all in all, do I like the WCL-100? Yes, I do. Do I recommend it to anyone shooting the X100 cameras? Yes, I dare say if you want to expand your perspective, this is a worthwhile purchase. If you aren't into going wider but want a tighter framing, Fuji also has a conversion lens that turns your 35mm focal length to a 50mm, aka the TCL-100. T is for telephoto. As more and more people jump on the X100 bandwagon and the imminent announcement of the next X100 camera just around the corner, don't sleep too hard on these conversion lenses, as no doubt, once people find out how cool these conversion lenses are, prices on the used market will start to creep up. Thanks for watching, guys, and until next time.